Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Rust for the rest of the world. This is going to be a very naive, unrealistic, but hopefully actually quite important and maybe even urgent talk. We're in a very, very strange geopolitical environment, and our computing resources are placing very significant demands on the planet, and the computing devices and the computing software that we write is introducing security vulnerabilities into everyone's homes and inside many people's bodies, inside people's cars, inside people's home appliances. I think Rust has a very, very significant and sort of a fundamentally important job to increase the standard of software in the world and be a better default for software systems. And as part of that, we need to include everyone, including the Asian continent as well as the rest of the world, in the development of the Rust project. And at least, so this is sort of the pitch. But let's go first. I'll first start by talking a little bit about myself and why I'm up on stage and why I'm really excited to share with everybody. I thought, hey, look, we'll just flesh out that idea. Maybe we have a bit of a problem statement about this idea of maybe Rust is very US-centric or very European-centric, but and how do we essentially share a little bit more? And then we're going to spend the bulk of the time talking about actions that you could take either individually or in your community. And I think that Florian's mention of local events is going to feature quite prominently. Okay, so who am I? Well, before I do the kind of customary, this is my name, this is where I work, I wanted to talk to you. So my name is Tim McNamara. I am pretty well known in the Rust community as the author of the textbook with this French boxer on the front. So this is Rust in Action. And when that book was being developed, I would post a new chapter online and people would comment on it, often very supportive. And so this is, at that time, was sort of on Twitter. And I sort of poked into people's profiles and noticed that there were lots of people from what I would call non-traditional locations. I had a really heavy expectation, even being a New Zealander, that the large majority of the audience or the readership of the book would be kind of California, maybe into Europe. But no, there were people from all across the world that were extremely excited about this programming language. And ever since then, so this is a talk that I've been waiting to give for about since 2018. So I guess it's six or 7 years. And so I hope that I can do my past self justice by really providing everyone with a very compelling talk. Anyway, so who am I? Again, my name is Tim McNamara. I'm the author of Rust in Action. I am quite well known using the term Tim Clicks, and I post a bunch of videos and tutorials. I have started a podcast. I organize a conference for the Rust community in Australia and New Zealand. And I also run my own business. I run a consultancy focused on increasing companies' adoption with the language. Probably most importantly, I'm also the father of 3 wonderful girls who I love very dearly and I miss quite a lot. As much as I appreciate the invitation to come to Hong Kong, it's always it's always sad being away from my kids. Okay, so here's a question. Rust 1.0 was almost 10 years ago. So if you're online or you're over on the far right or my far right, think about like where things were for you 10 years ago. Because for me, I probably had a different impression. I had this huge amount of anxiety. I just moved into a new city, had a new job, first baby on the way, bought a house, but there was actually something else. I was worried that it was too late to program in Rust. I first encountered Rust in about 2012, as it was publicly announced, and I had been watching the development of this language and the language moving really rapidly and gaining lots of excitement, and there was a huge amount of energy around stabilization. And by the time 1.0 came out, I thought it was too late. I was lost. I was 3 years behind. I was actually quite distraught because at that stage, I was working as a Python developer in data science and had increasingly thought that this is hugely wasteful. It's costing hundreds of megabytes of RAM just to run silly little jobs, and this is awful. And I started learning this anyway. The question is, at that point, everyone, you have your impression about the present, and not all of your assumptions are correct. Within, let's say, 4 years of that thing, I had become one of the world's leading Rust people, because I had published one of its premier textbooks and had been highly active online from New Zealand, which is the wrong place in the wrong time zone. It is literally thousands of kilometers away from anywhere else. And I had no networks. I didn't work for anyone. I was doing it on my own time. I was completely alone. And so even though it feels as though everything is sort of against you, what I hope that you can come out from today with all of these wonderful projects that we're going to be introduced to is an idea that you too can kind of claim something for yourself. You're not late. There's so much time. The future is very long. Like, you're not late. You have the ability to change. Then the question is, well, like, where is Rust going? So when Rust 1.0 was established, it was a very important project for Mozilla at the time, because they had an existential crisis. Mozilla was Firefox was being crushed by Chrome, and they could not parallelize the browser. And so they were so desperate that they needed a brand new programming language just to enable concurrency, that they created Rust. And then and now, though, we have a foundation, and it is a membership-based organization, primarily funded by American trillion-dollar companies. And so it can feel as though we don't really have any say. But there is another very significant part of that, which is that the Rust project exists outside of the foundation. The Rust Foundation's sole purpose is to support the project, and you as an individual can interact directly with the project, and you can support your workplace to kind of participate in the foundation. We get to choose if we're going to be coherent or if we're going to be chaotic. We get to choose what Rust is and the future that it will bring. And I hope that Rust is going to essentially make good on its promise to the world at energy efficient, sort of like people respecting computing. I think this is a very, very valuable goal. I look at this map and think there is one there is actually one company that is a platinum member of the Rust Foundation, Huawei, that isn't an American technology company. But it's interesting when you look at maps and think about what's wrong. Does anyone know what's missing from this map? There's no New Zealand on the map. So I live in a country that is commonly left off. It's like a perennial joke. And so New Zealand is in this very interesting perspective where everything seems to be very, very far away. And because we can kind of hide, because we're literally not on the map. We're not important at all. And the reason why I bring that up is that I want to just kind of put that back and say, well, even if you feel like you're invisible, you actually still have a voice. One of the mottos of the Rust language or the Rust project is this idea that Rust is empowering everybody or empowering everyone. My question then, though, is that this kind of brings like two slightly difficult points. One is we need to define some terms. One is empowering, and the other is everyone. So because it's sort of logically inconsistent, it's impossible to empower everybody. So what do we mean? Do we need to have that empowerment be equally distributed? Rather than just having like one person getting most of it and everyone else getting a tiny bit. Is that enough? This is our power gauge. We're all going up. Is that okay? And everyone is a difficult word because the Rust project is also inclusive, but that by implication requires exclusion. We exclude what I feel would be predatory or we would exclude a lot of people from who would be happy to speak about others in a way that would be classified as hate speech, for example. And who is left out? Do we need to empower people who don't even use a computer? And for example, the reason why these questions are really important is that when you choose to participate, you're able to change what these terms mean. This isn't some sort of legal discussion. It's a very fluid problem that, and the definitions that are used are created by the people that are actually building the thing, building Rust. We've already talked about this a little bit in terms of how Rust is structured. So if you ever think about Rust, let's draw a large picture. So I have Rust users here. And there are a lot of them. We're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's sort of doubling about every 9 to 12 months. We've been growing exponentially for over a decade. In fact, closer to 15 years. So over here, there might be like a small group, which is the Rust project. And I'm going to get the Venn diagram wrong, but about here, it's much smaller than this in reality. There are a couple of people in the foundation who probably, most of them would say that they're part of the project, but some of them probably don't. And The important thing to note mentally is that these three are different. And the foundation is the legal entity, the project are people that you interact with online. But their impact is much, much broader, essentially all of the blue, and beyond that, because that's just the people that are developing with Rust. So we need to kind of think, if we want to grow the language or grow the community, then the question is how? I want to do this in sort of 4 steps. One, we've got, let's say you. Then we might have a team. And then there's the local area. And then there's kind of an ambitious goal of maybe even worldwide. And a message that I think is quite useful is to work outwards from what you control. And let's start with things that we can do. One of the things that we can do is make a strong decision to learn Rust really well and adopt Rust for the things that we're building. Actually, building things in the language is a very positive way to support the language's growth at all. No one is going to be there if it isn't being used. But then there's this question of should you actually make a decision to learn this thing? Every new tool promises that it's going to, here's sort of an expectation for what productivity is supposed to look like. You have a baseline, and then you adopt a new tool, and immediately it's supposed to sort of go up. And this is how we expect. So this is I learned Rust at point over here, this yellow first point, and then once I had learned Rust, I'm now faster. Or, but that's actually not what happens. Typically, so we'll start at the baseline, and when you learn Rust, the first thing that happens is your productivity actually decreases because you are less productive. You're not fluent in the language. You don't understand the tools, the ecosystem. There is a lot of complexity that you discover, and so you go slow. And then there's kind of this gradual or kind of an uneasy growth upwards. Or I'll make that slightly more positive up here. And then hopefully we can kind of we move to an extraordinarily strong productivity gain when you recognize that you're now no longer having to, now that your software is stable, now that you're able to prevent bugs rather than firefight. And so it's not just the number of lines of code that you are producing, but it's the number of hours that you're investing on fixing bugs. It has reduced because the quality of your software is higher. And at some point, you need to decide that you're comfortable with going slow while you're learning. That's a very difficult thing to decide upon because we don't like going slow. We don't like feeling clumsy. In order for us as a society to progress, we need to make that progress happen. And I don't want to send people sort of into the burning house and rescuing people, and because there is actually another choice that you have to make too. You need to also be aware when it's time to disengage. Before you get into this, especially if you wanted to get into sort of more advocacy or community building type work, it will take as many hours as you are willing to give it. I guarantee that I can personally attest to that. And there have been many, many people already in Rust's 10-year history who have had very significant, essentially, it has a very significant mental cost having to absorb all of the pressure that comes with being with someone who just keeps doing more work. The other thing to remember is that Rust is just a programming language. It's not a religion. It's okay if there is another program, and it's actually okay if you say, actually, today I'm going to do my job. We're just going to use Java. Like, that's actually a perfectly reasonable thing to do. There's no moral obligation to retain loyalty to Rust. Like, Rust is neutral. There will be some people who have decided, okay, I'm willing to take that thing to learn Rust well. This is one of the individual actions that I can take. So how do Tim, please tell me, how do I learn Rust? And here's kind of like my 4-step menu, or like 4-step plan. One is you actually need to mentally take a moment to accept that it is difficult, that it is a process, that you will make mistakes. But you should also remember that you have done it before. You have built other skills. I also am a strong proponent of reading a lot of code, for example, digging into the standard library and seeing how things are built. There are no, quote, experts in Rust. They're just different programmers who are at a different stage of their own development. And then I think the really good way to learn is like with lots of small projects. So we need to remember that learning is a difficult skill. Humans have limited working memory. We can only, there's a kind of famous thing of between, is it 3 to 7 or 5 to 7 different things we can keep in our heads at any given time. When you are attempting to learn new syntax and new semantics, you take out some of those slots that are available for you to analyze. Novices make lots of lots of mistakes that other people don't. Rust has lots of sort of complexity that is obvious once you learn it, but when you are getting started, you constantly need to worry, am I doing the right thing? Every single decision adds a little bit of anxiety. And there are hundreds of these all the time. And every single time that there are these binary choices, or in fact, sometimes more than binary, we create anxiety for people learning the language. Once we're in a conference, we've kind of understood that this is like, people should just learn it. And why? Well, Rust values precision. We actually care about the way that data is represented in memory or on disk or by the operating system. The language provides full control. And so it does that by being very noisy in its syntax. And it is explicit. And so you will be told about the different integer widths that you have available to you. You cannot easily just ask for a number. That's just not something that Rust is willing to provide. They'll say, no. You should go program in JavaScript if you just want a number. The other thing that's sort of holding us back is that our own prior knowledge is unable to accept newer things and categorize the new knowledge correctly. And so we kind of make these subtle category errors as well. And for example, it's really unfamiliar. You ask someone who does not know Rust, but they've read a couple of words and they think, what is a lifetime? That is something they just don't have. There's no bucket to put that in, because no other programming language has this lifetime concept in the type system outside of research languages, which, Rust emerged in. Okay. I'm going to have type theorists stamping on me very shortly. So Rust it introduces several new concepts. When you're learning Rust, your prior knowledge sort of kind of gets in the way. There are lots of things that are that come up, like, why can't I sort floats? Like, all of these questions emerge as you are trying to learn a language. The reason why you are having difficulty learning Rust is that you're learning an entire computer science curriculum or computer architecture, like university level knowledge, in at the same time you're trying to get a web app running, because Rust provides that full control and is quite it's just not very forgiving to people that don't want to know. And also people that program in Rust are just generally curious. It's just unsatisfying saying, why is there static, const, and immutable? Why are there three terms that mean, if you look in a dictionary, they'll mean fixed? Why do those have different meanings in the programming language? So here's an idea. If the term doesn't make sense, use a different one. I mean, I hate the term ownership, for example. Instead, I just say responsible for cleanup. Like I find the term ownership very odd, because from a property rights perspective, this is like me doing most of a law degree. The whole notion of property rights, at least in the English common law tradition, is that you can exclude others from access, and you can say that they're trespassing. But an owner in Rust has no ability to trespass access. There's no sort of locking mechanism. I find that analogy doesn't work for me. So I just pick my own one. Borrowing? What about saying just read only or read write references? Stack in the heap. You could just say, well, there's local data like available to the function, or shared data. You can pick your own terms. That's okay. We're now on the next step, which is reading code. So I've got a book and a shelf. My shelf contains books. There isn't much in a book. It's just a count of pages. And so this is probably okay for most people that haven't read Rust. And then like 20 seconds later, you get introduced to stuff that looks like this. Okay, so what's going on here? And this is what I recommend that you do when you start to read code. Okay. We need to we could start by saying, here's a type, option, here's a book, and so we've got three types. And there's also got shelf. So we've got, I'll scribble this one out. And what do these lifetime parameters mean? So we've got tick A and tick B. And there's also this other thing over here, which is a constraint between A and B. This is saying tick B ... tick A. And that establishes a relationship which says that so we're reading a book. That's what this thing is doing. It's reading one book, and we from a bookshelf. The book must be on the bookshelf, even though it's been asked as a separate parameter, essentially. But it's also possible in this particular, the option is also having the role of saying that we might have no book to read. I don't know why it's there. I guess I just wrote a silly training example. And if you find syntax that is unfamiliar or things that are difficult, that's actually very useful. Because now you've figured out, okay, that's kind of my limitation. And you can ask an AI to explain things. It might not, for raw syntax stuff, it's probably going to be reasonable. At least it's better than complete confusion, and it's highly specific to the problem at hand. We'll talk about LLMs later if there is an interest, but going through the process of reading code and exposing yourself to more of it is really quite useful. Essentially what this is saying is that we have a book. We know that this book must exist inside the shelf, and it's impossible for us to create a null pointer by having some reference to some sort of dead thing that doesn't exist. Once you are more comfortable, you can start to look at more code. And here's some other unfamiliar syntax. So I'm just going to try and circle things that are kind of odd, especially if you don't know Rust. So Rust has a trait system. The traits are its interfaces. They must be brought into local scope. But the underscore is essentially saying, make sure that they're available in this module, but I don't really need to talk to them by name. I can just access it. I can just access their methods. And for this case, we actually have editors provides a bunch of iterator methods over various things. And the process of modifying the difference between what is dot equals versus over here we've got a dot are very useful to identify, especially when you're beginning and trying to see if you can figure out that there is a lot of complexity, because you kind of need to forgive yourself as well. Like, there are so many tokens in Rust that it's very, very easy to get confused, and it's sort of valid. All right. That was a relatively dry doing things by myself in front of a stage, it's much more fun, like interactively in a classroom. But let's write some code. We need some examples of some fun, cool stuff to do. We are humans with a brain that is fed with dopamine and serotonin, and also oxytocin. But let's just talk about dopamine. Give ourselves small examples that work and kind of give us that reward. Yes! Things that light up are really great. And so we need to start small. You should rewrite a small project that you've already written and completely understand. Do not attempt to learn a new programming language and a new domain at the same time. Your working memory is finite or thereabouts, and so start with something that you already understand. Then write something that you would, happily just write this in Python. You would feel more fluent. You'll be frustrated because there'll be things that you want to do in Rust that you can't, because it's just so easy in Python or JavaScript or whatever, or OCaml. But once you're there, you can then start to look at bigger projects. A TUI with Ratatouille. That's pretty cool. You could hack a magic patch. We could build a web app with WebAssembly. I think there's a workshop about that this afternoon. You could actually write a parser for your weird internal format that work uses and has used since 97 with Pest. You could write a native app with Tauri. You could speed up your Go application with Rust and a native extension. Or, in fact, one of the Pio3 maintainers is in this room. And this is a very, very good way to bolt or bring Rust into an existing code base. We could write smart contracts. We could have a fleet of autonomous modes with Zeno. We could do a high-frequency trading engine. We could run a secure unikernel. All of these, we could even create a certificate. This is much harder to do as a beginner, let's say. I think it's only been done once, especially as an open source project. These are all projects that are going to be introduced to you today. This is a really, really cool conference to be at, and you should make the most of it. And the next thing is that we have we want to grow. So we need to also respect that teaching is itself a skill. The same thing, respect your prior knowledge. You've got a lot. Observe others. This is the same as reading code. You should practice. Find lots of opportunities to practice teaching. It's the same as small examples. Here is some very specific advice. Make mistakes publicly. It breaks the barrier between you and the learners. You should sacrifice accuracy for understanding. Do not attempt to explain computer architecture to someone who wants to know why it's called U-size. They don't have enough knowledge yet you can't give them that. Be mindful of expert blindness. This is a phenomenon where you, as the expert, actually no longer remember what it's like to be a novice. And never teach alone. Feedback is really important. Okay, when we get out to our team, you need to remember that adopting Rust is not a technical decision, it's a business decision. And they're only going to do that if you can actually make sure that Rust is highly likely to get on the right side of this curve. And by right side, I mean up here. If it's not, or it's unlikely, it's not going to work. Sharing Rust is actually harder than it looks. And the way around this in your company is to look at the history and find out how other languages were adopted. Be prepared to become the Rust expert in your company. They will look to you because you're the person who introduced it. And never underestimate the value of interacting with people. Locally, you can start meetups that don't even 4 people is better than 50 sometimes. And food is something that is very culturally relevant and is culturally local, whereas a very large technology conference doesn't have that same impact. Or at least it doesn't have the same proximity to you, to your audience. This month, or actually next month, there will be a project where the Rust project is going to be soliciting survey responses and interview responses. If you are in this part of the world and you would like to spend maybe 45 minutes on a video call, I'm one of the people in that project. So we are going to be collating people's aspirations for Rust in the next month and hopefully influence the development of Rust in the future. Do look into, if you're very eager, you're also very welcome to participate in the Rust project as well. And the Rust Foundation actually now has a dedicated community liaison, a gentleman named Ernest Kissidu, and he ran Rust Nation UK for many years, but still figuring out how to work to engage with Asia. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you. So we have a few minutes, I think, for questions. We are running late, so that's why we're going to shorten the question time just a little bit. One more thing I wanted to announce is that we also have, for the online people who are watching, how do I say that? For people who are watching online, there is a question box that you can type into, and we will, of course, read out your questions. So don't feel afraid to ask questions if you're online. Otherwise, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and we'll give you a mic.
Before Alan does that, I'm also in that Discord server. So if we can't get to a question, flick them in there, and I will be happy to answer them later today.
Okay.
Hey. So I've been introducing like Rust in the robotics kind of like communities, and often the feedback I get is like, oh yeah, another like Rust freak that is actually completely on the, I don't know, the reduced side of it. So how do you present yourself coming to your customers, right? And actually introduce Rust in a way that is actually not blocking off like people like this.
Yeah, it's very difficult to not be perceived as the crazy Rust person. Especially, so I think the way to do this is just to be highly pragmatic and focus on areas where the company is having specific problems right now, and that the ideally away from critical areas of the company. So if you've got some internal tool that keeps falling over that is useful, that's an opportunity for improvement with Rust. Do not tell them to replace their critical business software with a new programming language they don't know. Allow them to gain confidence, respect the fact that this is a gradual, difficult process, and also you are challenging people's careers. If you have an established company, you might have tenured individuals who have been there for decades or more, who have devoted significant portions of their life to, let's say, C++ or something else, and you're now telling them that they are wrong, that they are negligent, that and this. So there is a person. Just I would go slow.
Any other question of Daniel? Yeah, I know who you are.
Thanks, Tim. I have a question for you. I recently helped a young person learn Rust as their first programming language, and they didn't have a problem with it. And so I'd be interested to hear your perspective on why there seems to be such a feeling in the broader community that Rust is just so hard to learn.
Rust tells you that you are wrong very, very quickly, and it is not forgiving. There are patterns. So, for example, I was a Go programmer before I was a Rust programmer, and we just sent things through channels. And we get no pointers. They just, like, the whole thing would explode. You cannot share ownership, the Rust term is share ownership. You need to decide, does this thread or does the other thread have responsibility? So there are patterns that just won't work in Rust. And again, the language and the compiler will be like a very helpful coach, but also very strict. They don't care that you're late. It's not going to allow your program to compile just because it would in Java. And so I think it's mostly social. Even though we think of programming languages highly technical, they are social constructions. We call ourselves a Rust community. And it, as much as I said, it's not really a religion, people do identify, it's like, well, I'm a Java programmer. I into the Java conferences, I interact with Java people, or I'm a Python developer. I do that. And so there's this social aspect as well, which I think is really, really challenging when there's a transition.
Thank you for the presentation. The one slide you had on empowering everyone really resonated with me. So I just want to say thank you for that. I like the everyone part and that we're allowed to have our own definition of that. In my case, it lets me, one, have less stress because I get the confidence. But in general, when I define everyone, after seeing your slide, it expands into the users who are using the tool. I work a lot in the last mile, and the devices that they are operating with in some of these places, it's been a real problem, like shipping JavaScript to run on those devices and Python to run on those devices. Since we adopted Rust, we've been able to at least like have that, and we've been able to empower them to do more things. So the empowerment just goes beyond the users of the Rust programming itself to the beneficiaries themselves. Thank you for that.
That's really fabulous to hear.
So any more questions? Then I guess if nothing, then I'm going to say something so we can come down and I'll come up and announce something.
Okay. Oh, questions from online. Question.
So we're going to read the question to you because obviously you can probably not see it right now. Tyre?
Do you think Rust is suitable for typical business CRUD application?
Okay, so this is Rust useful for CRUD, or like essentially your traditional web app? I would say yes. The only area where I think Rust is, so I think of Rust as a very general purpose language. I think Rust is inappropriate though for interactive work. So if you use Jupyter Notebooks, Rust is not very well suited to the interactive exploratory workflow. So if you're into R or Python and sort of like playing around with data, then stick with Python. Although you can use polars these days, which is written in Rust. Who has programmed in Rust for more than 3 years? Is there anyone in the room who has never used the Rust compiler? So that's kind of sensible. I've hosted meetups where the majority of the room has not used the Rust compiler. There is a huge amount of excitement about this language. And even though it doesn't feel like it, you are the leaders here. And if you want to, you could have a group that meets on a Tuesday morning and at a local cafe. You could have something that is small, that is for you and your community. It is difficult because you need to learn a set of new skills: advocacy, communication, and education. But I think that is also highly valuable. And again, I really appreciate the invitation to come and speak. I'm so glad that I was finally able to give this talk that I've been waiting to for many, many years. Okay, thanks all. I'm going to get off the stage.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again.